Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. We all dream of the progress in new alternative energy sources development. Two guests are invited to our studio today. One of them has already been here, Holger Thorsten Schubart. And if I remember correctly, 2 years ago you and I were talking about neutrinos and the evidence of their efficacy. The Nobel Prize was awarded for this discovery. That's right, for discovering the mass of neutrino. And things have gotten pretty advanced lately. Further discoveries, developments and research have been made. Let me introduce Skenderbeg Klaiqi, who is here in our studio to answer the questions regarding this topic. You precisely deal with method research of how energy, to say, is not generated, but what exactly is happening in such case? Energy is being converted, what perhaps is the most appropriate term. As of today, we know that the energy is available. Now is probably the best moment to discuss it. Less than a week ago, at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, just imagine, a mass of 1 neutrino was defined. We're talking about a particle that was considered to be weightless for years. Today we know that 1 neutrino corresponds to 1 electron volt, what is a very small value. We also know that there are 16 billion neutrinos per square centimeter. Thus we can talk about energy, and we are very happy to have a researcher from the Scientific Council here, who will simply demonstrate the conversion of neutrino energy by an example. Though there is no neutrino particle capture, the example will show that special metamaterials can convert energy into a powerful flow. Thus, the experiment is based on the use of a special tape, which we see on the table next to the device. With its help, we can get a measurement. This means that things now take on more specific shapes. Last time we discussed that the tape or something else will be used, while in this example it is exactly the tape. We even have scissors here to cut it. The material itself is important. The tape is thus only a medium on which the electron's motion takes place. That is, an electric flow is carried out. But as we said, it is the material that plays the key role. It can, of course, be used to produce mediums of various shapes. This material can be used and built in everywhere. It can be a wall, a ceiling, floor, whatever. Our little experiment will show that the energy conversion occurs. And here we need to make one fair comment. We use the term neutrino-energy not to indicate that the energy received originates from individual particles, which scientists strive to capture. However, neutrino energy is the invisible spectrum of radiation, and yet we do not make a detailed distinction as to what it refers to, whether it's a natural and/or artificial radiation spectrum, whether it's known or unknown. Under certain conditions, there are electromagnetic waves, electrosmoke, and it does not matter what else can relate to it. We have made some progress in this field, and of course there was also an opinion that neutrinos are captured. In fact, they are not. What happens physically on the upper layer of the carrier is atomic vibrations. We are talking about the atomic vibrations at nanomaterials. How is a very small part of this kinetic energy being transferred to the electronic flow? How does it all work? Skenderbeg Klaiqi will demonstrate the process with a concrete example so that the viewers can see for themselves. Right, we will also show that the forms will be possibly different, going beyond neutrino. What happens exactly? It's absolutely clear that something is happening. We can already see that. We have a meter here. Now it shows 2 volts, if I understand correctly. That's 0.6, or in other words, 612 millivolts. The strip has been left here specifically to make it clear how the energy level fluctuates. Sometimes the indicator crawls up, sometimes down. Thus, as we said, or as Schubart has already said, energy is not generated, but rather it is converted from one form to another. This is not a new concept, but an old one, stating that the energy is already available and is only being transformed. Mechanical into electrical, or electrical into any other. Now there are ways to convert thermal energy into electrical energy, not with some special auxiliary elements, but with quite ordinary ones. This strip, for example, is made of aluminum. Can I hold it, or is it dangerous? Go ahead. Just to show that these are only two cables attached to the tape on the right and left. You can also see the special coating. Yes, you can leave the tape underwater, and so on. I have some more here.
Folie da mitgebracht.
Let's see, there is another piece of special tape made in the lab. The job was very time-consuming. There is the coating on one side. Other metals can also be used. Okay, there are also copper. Exactly, it's a double-sided copper tape. Metal is the carrier material on which the electron motion takes place, and the coating. You can see that copper is on one side and black coating on the other. We'll measure everything. We will chop off a piece here or here, or if to attach it just like it is. Either way. We're not doing that right now, otherwise we risk a short circuit. Initial measurements were made in the presence of a notary. Short circuit measurements have also been made. They were recorded to eliminate the memory, battery effect. There is nothing special in the demonstrations of the material's electrical conductivity, rather it is important to understand what it is caused by. I mean, there is a possibility of stationary recharging, or energy generation only for a short period of time. So as always, there will be critics who will say, in the laboratory the effect is maintained for years. Let's take this stripe. Here we will also demonstrate the increase in voltage to show that the last one is not precharged in any way to work now and then to stop. We will cut this piece off the tape and show what voltage, what electrical power will be achieved when using it. Let's gently cut off one strip first, then the other one, and see the effect on each of them. The crucial point here is that this can be compared to a solar panel that operates under the influence of light. But I can assure you that we also took measurements without having any light sources at a depth of 30, 35, even 40 meters. Even if so, everything works similarly. Is it then possible to adjust the voltage across the length of the strip? The principal factor is the surface area, that is, the number of square centimeters. In our trial experiment, the following results were obtained. On 1 square centimeter of a 0.1 mm thick tape, 3.6 watts, and thus 1 cubic meter of such material will theoretically bring 63,000 watts, which is 63 kilovolts, although such a value won't be received in practice because it's not necessary. As for the area, it's easy to be calculated. We have about 3 square centimeters here. Is this all on the scissors now? I use the scissors to prepare the carrier itself. In fact, everything works like this. One side of the strip is connected to the meter wire, and we see 0.9 volts. If we measure in this position, we get about 0.98, or say 1 volt. When we put a second stripe on the first one, it's getting interesting now, because we observe this particular layering. Power increases, and now it's 1.8. reaching nearly 2 volts. If we overlay the third strip of a material, main thing is to avoid short circuits. We now get 2.6 volts. Here, so you can see, we put the next strip on the previous three. And in this case we get 3.2 volts. That's already enough for a little light bulb. It will be interesting to look at the LED. Or do we have a calculator? Let's show how it works with the calculator. That's great, the audience can witness everything. We choose a calculator as an example for a reason, because a mobile phone would work similarly, but in this case it must be taken into account that it requires constant and uniform voltage. With the calculator, though, it's possible to see the main principle itself. The calculator doesn't have a solar battery right now. It's an installation, so you can see how the device works. The light test, it works. With the installation, no. But we want our strips of material to make it work. Essential is that with the example of an appliance powered by electricity, the potential consumer sees that this method of tape layering allows customizing the feeder according to the needs. This way, the tape can be built into the calculator case. Let's see if it turns on now, or yet not. It's all wired up now. Yes. And now you'll see on the example of calculations that the calculator is working. Yes, it's working. Now we have here 2.645. Just so we're clear. Working. Not working. Working. Not working. And in this case, it's a technical demonstration of how, for example, Texas Instruments calculator worked. I can safely name the manufacturer. We had such in schools and they were powered by first solar panels. Nothing more than that is happening here. The neutrino are now acting as the feeding element. The carrier can act not only in the form of a tape, but also as a capsule. It is possible. Here the LED. How many layers of a tape have you attached to it? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try. Can I? Sure, go ahead. Let's take the green one, please. This is the very moment when Konrad first holds neutrino in his hands. Nothing fake here. I have nothing hidden in my hands to make the LED work. The effect is preserved. Someone can say that it will only last for a short period of time, or years. Now Konrad himself was shining with the light bulb. In this example, you can see that there is power. What is decisive is the consumer's understanding that neutrino technology is not about a single piece of tape, but rather a set of layers that are specifically connected to each other. The element is later embedded into the device in a certain way. Now, for example, we have a calculator here, but later it will be a mobile phone, a computer, and in the future we can talk about energy provision for the entire households. Yes, I can see that there are very thin tapes feeding the calculator, and of course it's insensitive to voltage spikes. Now we will see how measurements change response to short circuits. With the circuit, we will set plus and minus at once. Measurements will not be taken at voltage levels or in amperes. Let's create a short circuit immediately and see how soon the indicator is reached. Now we've got what's shown here, 0.84. We'll close the chain and hold it for about 10 seconds and then dismiss. There is no battery effect. There is no energy accumulation. The indicators do not increase but remain at the same level. It's actually very impressive. It's huge. It's serious. On a simple tape, no, not a simple tape, extremely complex one. Is it patented? If I understand correctly. You see, the problem is as follows. People today operate mainly with the concepts of mechanics, and all power supply is seen as a result of work of mechanical units, devices. It's always based on transformation, no matter what kind of energy we're talking about. In case of wind, it's quite simple. It's about balancing the air masses. The air is moving. And if you ask the meteorologist how to generate electricity in low and high pressure areas, he would probably shrug his shoulders. But a wind turbine technician, an engineer, is able to use this power. The airflow drives the blades, and they, in turn, force the motor to rotate, producing electricity. It's a mechanical method. And what happens here is, there is an electron in the electron microscope and nanomaterials, so the instability in the position of electrons must come from somewhere. When one moves, it affects the others. And as was shown in Karlsruhe, there is this incredibly small particle that has mass. And the measurements were also conducted many meters underground, without any access to artificial light. In a concrete bunker or something like that? Concrete bunker, and a depth of 40 meters inside a mountain. 40 meters is quite a lot. This means atomic vibrations, they're in question now. For us, everything is based on the transformational movement, which is also present in a wind power plant. We amplify pressure, vibrations, and resonance. Anyone can imagine a simple example of resonance. Here I have a shoelace and a stick, and you're asking me to play something. Anyone would wonder how to do it. We just bend the stick and pull the shoelace, and now it comes out as a string. Now you can extract the sound. But it's still not a Stradivarius violin, of course, not even a musical instrument, not a quality resonance. And the researchers are doing nothing more than creating a secret recipe. The decisive factor is the optimal distribution of the material on the carrier surface in order to create the necessary conditions for optimum resonance and its further use. It took many years to achieve this result. A huge amount of effort was put into making the first light bulb light up. That's very impressive. Example with the calculator, and now let's show the measurements again. They are kept at approximately the same level. You are talking about fluctuations. Are they strong or not? They're small, and as we can see, the rate is increasing in case of copper, with copper tape. In case of aluminum, the numbers remain relatively stable. And when using other types of tape with high level of insulation, the numbers fluctuate. We did it consciously to illustrate the fact that the fluctuations are coming from somewhere, from an external or any other force, as it is in molecular photon theory, where photons are charged particles from the outside. The same holds for our case.
Unsere Folie oder unsere Erfindung irgendwie.
Reassuring the basic science researchers, the first problem was that neutrino was considered to be a particle without mass. The second was the absence of its interaction with matter. It was assumed that neutrinos could not be converted, and that was indeed a problem. The coating on the tape consists of very complex materials, which due to their crystal structure form a very dense surface. And it is important to note that these materials do not capture neutrinos, they just go through. The words of one of our professors: imagine one neutrino is a peppercorn, when an electron is a watermelon, and if you compare this peppercorn to a watermelon, it's just a tiny amount. But we have 16 billion such tiny particles passing through a square centimeter per second. And you only need to understand that the necessary number of them is being reached, provided the conditions for the motion of electrons are met, including the desired angle. The electrons are starting to move, we've seen that before. We need to take advantage of that. In this case, it means, as I have already mentioned, to get rid of the way of thinking on the scale of large mechanisms for energy generation somewhere in the fields. We are not going to use our technology in the same way as wind farms. We do not pursue this goal, because in the end we are talking about how to ensure the operation of electrical appliances with the help of small particles by converting energy on the small autonomous cells. In this case, you can save on power grid wires. This is unbelievable. Absolutely. With high voltages, energy transportation is necessary. And the water loss is just huge. Absolutely. I think it makes great sense to provide this type of energy supply in the conditions of early industrialization. Since then, it has never been questioned, and later on the coverage area was only improved and increased. No one ever said there are other ways, other alternatives. Maybe they just went missing. Perhaps there were people like Tesla who offered other options, and their inventions were simply brought back, if to say there is a conspiracy theory. Prosperity in itself has developed on this kind of power supply, and energy is welfare, prosperity. But today we are offering an alternative that we have been able to demonstrate here. Now let's get back to maths once again. Suppose there is a central mechanism generating a gigawatt of energy, which delivers alternating current with a capacity of more than 380,000 volts on wires diverging throughout the country. And this energy is transformed many times in order to lower the voltage level to ensure the operation of various electrical appliances. Speaking about our system, in case of neutrinos, the source of convertible energy itself is directly inside the device or in the house, in the wall, under the roof. And if we start to sum up individual units of 3 watts, 2 watts, 5, 10 watts of energy, we end up getting the same gigawatt, but already saving on transportation, the energy provider. We can already see the fact that networks are not able to withstand the amount of electricity supplied. What kind of failures occur, that their maintenance brings more and more problems. In addition, the electricity we are used to is produced from combustible minerals, and now the moment has come when the awareness of consumption among the population leads to the search for alternative technologies. That's why we're happy about any chance and thankful that we've been given the opportunity to demonstrate this method, explaining how it works. It's incredibly exciting because you can imagine that we'd lay enough tape layers on top of each other and turn it into a battery. For example, for that camera over there that will run constantly without any recharging. Basically, what I showed you today was a method of layering, staple system. But you can go the other wise with the stripes. I haven't prepared them today, but in practice they can be twisted into batteries. The measurements obtained reached about 200 microamperes per square centimeter. Large sheet of tape is disrupting the meter, or what's going on there? No, nothing will damage the device, and at the moment it shows some power of electric flow, but the voltage itself, the voltage remains at a constant level. Constant tension is the decisive aspect. In technical terms, there is nothing more than dragging energy from the tape. To give you a certain picture, let's talk about electric cars. Today it is a very relevant topic. The model of the car we are currently developing is the pi model, named after the mathematical number of the circle, infinity. The idea is to use such materials as the so-called carbon modification, graphene, making car body parts. And that's how we see it. There is a small battery installed under the hood, under the boot lid, and for the time that the car does not move, all the energy it collects is accumulating. And if taken into account, most people have a car in urban traffic idle for 8 hours at work. During this time, it will collect and store the amount of energy enough for the way back home, without the use of a charger. And in the evening, already at home, the same situation. Because most houses do not have the capacity to recharge electric cars, there is no infrastructure. The problem is, firstly, the lack of sockets, and secondly, the very origin of the energy. Energy for maintenance of electric cars is produced on the basis of coal. In this case, the question arises, why do electric cars exist at all? Yes, because if everybody switched to those, there is just not enough lithium and other resources. The high level of environmental pollution in the battery production should also be mentioned. Here, as far as production is concerned, does it do any harm to the environment? I hear this question quite often, as well as questions about the cost and availability of material. But the required material is not expensive at all and is available everywhere, and production is no way harmful to the environment. Here the key point is exactly the distribution of elements, the structure. This is what happens. If the sun's rays are directed through the baked glass, we observe certain effects in some parts of it. Another question I'm often asked is, how long the voltage holds up? It all depends on the carrier material. For example, in case of copper, the effect lasts relatively long, with slightly less when using aluminum, but with sufficient insulation, also quite long.
Dann dauert lange oder konvertiert.
We're talking about years. We're talking about oxidation of materials for the carrier surface. They need to be properly soldered between each other, and this is the challenge in the laboratory. The industrial production of these parts will start later, like it was with the photovoltaic. It all started with a demonstration on a small element, but today the technology is pervasive. Freeways, rooftops. I think the technology will be an addition. Say, technology will be a winning step towards solving a global problem. But now we have a lot of devices that do not need much power to work, whereas previously there were halogen spotlights which required 500 watts to work. The LEDs replaced it, having a much lower power consumption of 20 watts, but the light intensity remained unchanged. And here I can imagine that even one element. But we have something else, heterogeneous power consumption. That means that even 500 watts can be used. It takes 500 watts to run the studio for half an hour. If there is this energy cell that accumulates energy during the day, which can then be stored for further use in the battery, just like in photovoltaic, or of course later by increasing the amount of energy stored in hydrogen. Subsequently, we can talk about other forms of energy saving. If, for example, it accumulates for 23.5 hours, you can then feed the 500-watt spotlight with this energy. I'm already very impressed. Here, for example, we see fluctuations. Now the indicator is at 400, before that 600. But in fact, the scientist's job is to investigate this process, and then the corresponding electronics will appear to regulate the constant voltage level. For example, mobile phones that require uninterrupted voltage at the same level. Research will be conducted on battery types, and it is possible that the first-stage batteries will appear later. That's how I see it. Can I tell you something? We work with a Swiss watch manufacturer. Since the 80s, photocells have been built into the watch. There could be our tape instead. Let me tell you a secret. Perhaps such models will be presented at the next watch show in Geneva. I would not say anything more, but the principle is exactly the same. The smaller the devices at the beginning, the easier is it to implement this method. Watches, calculators, hearing aids. Then comes the question of increasing energy levels, and here you mentioned something very important: stability, uniform energy supply. If we have a rotating mechanism that generates electricity, the light becomes more or less intense depending on the speed of rotation. But the mobile phone, in turn, requires a certain precisely extinct level of energy, which is controlled by electronics. The energy is collected, stored in a small battery, controlled by the software, and it can already be clearly seen that with neutrino technology, it is possible to break free from the charges. I think so too. We're not quite ready for this yet. We need to explore, develop, and work towards the progress. We also conduct various other experiments, for example, with temperatures for direct energy conversion, without exhaust, without any side effects. I do hope that we have made at least some progress towards resolving this global problem. That's putting it mildly. While it's really something special, almost a science fiction, and a prize was awarded. It only speaks to the modesty of our scientists. On the other hand, it is to some extent an important task for me, as chairman of our scientific board, to point out that it is only a small experiment, a small calculator that works. For the lab workers, it is. But for our mathematicians, working with theory and practice, it's something more. What I would like to emphasize is that if we expand production and use this technology everywhere, whether in vehicles or mobile phones, there will be no more loss of natural resources when generating electricity. It will take a couple more years. Now we are starting to work with the industries. They realize there are prospects, especially in Karlsruhe, where the taxpayer-funded research institute operates. It is quite clear that everyone now knows that one neutrino particle corresponds to less than 1 electron volt, but the particles themselves account for 16 billion per second on a square centimeter. Very few, but at the same time the quantity is high, primarily on the surface we have designed. Professor Strauss, whom I'd like to recite, once said, by calculation, theoretically, there is enough energy for us, daily accounting for 5,000 years of unused radiation. Thus, he, for example, explained why the core of the planet does not cool down, that there are a huge amount of cosmic energy available, we cannot even imagine. But I believe that in the 21st century we are called to touch this knowledge, to get closer to its meaning. It is necessary to exploit these discoveries, optimize them, and develop them further, just to find alternatives to what we have been doing since the early industrialization, especially now that everyone is talking about climate change. But now there is a need for a different kind of energy, the production of which is harmless to the environment. I'm really interested in it. I can't wait to use my camera or phone without a charger. In fact, it is possible, provided the development of electronics, devices that will counterbalance the fluctuations, will cushion them. Let's say we need a power plant to power a multi-story building. It doesn't make sense. If each light bulb has its own feeder, this tape, there is no longer any need for a nuclear power plant. Once again, I want to emphasize that energy is already available. It is everywhere and should only be transformed. There are many kinds of natural sources we are able to transform. For example, the force of gravity, ejection force, electromagnetic force, magnetic force, the force of known and unknown particles. All we have to do is to continue researching, searching, and finding the most effective methods of energy conversion. Many of the combinations of different forces interactions in my experiments are giving encouraging results. There is hope that we find a solution to this problem, crucial for all the humanity. Perhaps it won't happen today, but in 10, 20 years, for sure. When there is a threat that the reserves of oil and other combustible minerals may run out, it is important for me to emphasize the following. Neutrino is an incredibly small particle, while the knowledge about it can help in solving geopolitical conflicts. We see what is happening in Saudi Arabia, what is happening in the world, and if even today we took just a small step, if you close your eyes and imagine that these materials are built into walls, floors, into electric cars, it becomes clear that there are worthy alternatives that do work, and with those, the world in 10, 20, 30 years will be converted to new forms of energy supply. That is why we are taking this small step, and at the same time we experience great joy just with the opportunity to demonstrate it. I am, you might say, dazzled by this experiment, but how's the progress? Is there any interest from the industry? Then China, as usual, will buy the technology? Or could we say it is necessary for the German industry to wake up and see that there is something new being investigated? Why not to take this opportunity to invest in the development in order to speed up the process? I'll say there can't be anything that's not allowed to be. If you come forward with this kind of destructive technology and announce there is an alternative, there will be those who are not interested in research in this area. For example, the automobile industry in Germany. We took full ownership of that industry. Diesel, automobile engines, the production certainly plays a leading role. For hundreds of years, German engineers have been considered the best in the world, and suddenly electric cars appear. Now the whole industry will be turned upside down, and of course at first everyone will try to hold on tight for what they can. And in this case we are not even talking about electric cars, but about a completely different kind of a technology, and I understand that very well. And then the Chinese come in with faster, better. It's already happened in many industries. The same thing happened with cell phones. Do we produce them? No. TVs? There is nothing else. It's about inertia, the belief that our national economy is unshakable. Besides, politics is not ready to adopt something new. I hope that with the help of your program we can address the audience, so that as many people as possible could think about the aforementioned and come to their conclusions. I think that's our main message to the audience. We advocate awareness, we want to show that there are new meaningful solutions, because we've already missed a lot. We have the best new technologies, and we are simply missing out on the opportunity to observe and develop them further. It's incredibly exciting for me. We may already be dedicating the next program to a mobile phone that is powered by neutrinos. Or I don't know, a camera you don't need to monitor the battery charge for. We should start with electric motors, small light sources. There are also other successful experiments with simple energy conversion, not only the method we have demonstrated. How is it possible to get in touch with you? Neutrino-Energy Group can be easily found. In Germany we have a limited liability company, a large advisory board made up of scientists from all over the world. There are talented inventors, theorists, as well as successful lawyers and entrepreneurs. As we said, what we have here, we want not only to create, but also to put it together in a single concept, offering a meaningful solution to the problems arised. You can find a lot of information on this topic in the media. There are those who exclaim that this is impossible, that it is just a battery or whatever else used just to demonstrate the experiment. And there are, of course, measurements obtained from various institutions. In the absence of light sources, and underground, underwater, everything worked similarly. I find all this incredibly interesting. I'm glad that you were both here, and I sincerely hope that we will receive feedback and interest from politicians, especially now, also from industry, which would have received more funding from the state for development. Maybe not. Maybe that's what the phones are for, to pursue their own specific goals. That's not what we want. But if others try to come out and outrun us again, we won't appreciate it. Yes, but now I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our researchers who for years, despite the confrontation, continued their work in the lab without recognition, but rather being ridiculed. Finally, it is possible to demonstrate the results of the work undertaken, so I'm very proud of the specialists working with us. You already got my recognition. You can't even imagine how happy I am, because that's what I want, for people to see this technology. 2 years ago I promised that you will make sure this method works not only in the laboratory, but also in the studio, and later the results will be beneficial in practice. Thank you so much, Skenderbeg Klaiqi. Please accept my gratitude for inviting me to participate in this remarkable program, aptly named Bewusst, which means conscious. Thank you very much for the opportunity to demonstrate our results. Thank you.